Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to you all for this interesting and exciting session we have for you. It's been a little over 2 months since we had an amazing design and engineering summit, and the response was really overwhelming. So it has been our endeavor to take the discussion further and bring the exceptional engineering leaders to the fore, who are actually the bedrock of domain capabilities what the country possesses. Today, we have Lada Chamberkalam, the Vice President, Powertrain Systems, Robert Bosch Engineering Solution and Business Solutions, India. So, she's actually a certified coach and she is very passionate about the people and technology. And Lada, thank you so much for your time and a pleasure having you for this session.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you. So, Lata, just to start the discussion, we will slightly go on your journey first, and then we will enter a little more deeply into what you do on your day-to-day basis, right?
Sure.
So that would be the flow for the day. And Lata, like you have broken many glass ceilings on the way from your start of your education and career till now, especially women in the field of technology was actually a minority back in early 90s, right? So what influenced you to pursue a career in tech? And just to add on top of it, like I could see that the shift from BHEL to lead the tech in traditional automotive organizations. Could you tell a little bit about your journey, please?
Yeah, thanks, Madhu, for that question. I have always worked in areas which are strongly connected to technology. I started my career with a short stint at BHEL for around 2.5 years, and I was working in the embedded software area. I would say that one of the first batch of engineers who got to work on software, and rest of my career was spent in the different areas of the automotive domain, except when I was in sales for 3 years in between. So which means around 25 plus years, I have been, working in organizations headquartered in Germany and in automotive. When I look back, I'm quite glad that I have had opportunities to pursue assignments, which is a combination of technology, business, and people, and that is something which I really love. And I have also worked across geographies like Europe. I have worked in underdeveloped countries like South Africa, different economy, different culture, which has enhanced my learning as well as intercultural perspectives. I also made some side steps in my career, like the one to sales, as well as managing certain global projects. That has helped me to understand the different facets of business. Being passionate to the employee development area, as Madhu told, I also got myself certified as a coach a decade back, and this really helps in my leadership journey. So I would say that it's not only technology that I deal with a lot of strategy, I deal with a lot of people topics as well, Madhu.
Yeah. So, sorry, Lata, just wanted to check, right, get a follow-up question on that. What is like to be a woman in technology, especially in the automotive industry where we are in? Actually, predominantly, this is all driven or centric towards headquarters, and it is like a little male-dominant industry. Could you give a little bit closer look onto that, please?
I would say there is no gender in the technology space. I personally don't carry the gender tag in my head since I was brought up in an environment where nobody stopped me from doing anything because I'm a girl, though I come from a very conservative family in Kerala. But there are certain hilarious experiences that I can remember after I joined the job. For example, in 1995, I was on an on-site assignment to Germany, which is in a small town near Munich. My previous organization had their headquarters there, and I was the only woman in the engineering side. And I remember some of the colleagues on the floor used to ask me whether I am from finance or whether I'm a secretary, since they believe that coming from in India, a lady doing an engineering job is something impossible. So that was Germany in 1995. I joined Bosch in Germany again 16 years back, and there also I was finding it very tough to find a woman leader who is above the level of a head of the department or so. But I'm really glad that things have changed, times have changed. In Bosch, we have a first lady on the board at this point of time, and at RBEI we have around 32% diversity, which is a very healthy mix to have. But what I feel is what you bring to the table is what matters in the organization. You are valued for your competency, your attitude, your trust building capability, confidence, empathy, and leadership skills. And this remains the same whether you are in India or Europe or Africa, and whether you are in the technology space or any other field. That's something which I have learned in the last 28 years.
That's well said, actually. It actually, I just go back with like one of the favorite, what do you call, engineer, like the first female engineer at Google and the former CEO of Yahoo, Marissa Mayer. She says the similar things, actually. If you can find something that you are really passionate about, whether you are a man or woman comes a lot less into play, and the passion is actually a general neutralizing force. So I think this echoes to what you currently said. Just to enter into the discussion, so it is interesting to see you have been working closely into the powertrain, which is actually the heart of any of the automobile vehicle. So you are actually in the ringside view of the change that the technology has brought into mobility, right? And how do you describe the future of mobility would look like? More so, especially in your domain, right? We understand that the powertrain division that you lead, you have both the conventional IC engine and which is actually fairly large to the current context, and then the electrification portfolio, which is actually upcoming. So, do you think electrification is a threat for your kind of business? Because Bosch has more products and portfolios in that space.
No, I don't see it as a threat at all. In fact, I would see it as an opportunity. There is no doubt that more and more electrified and hybrid vehicles will come into the market. But we at Bosch are very well positioned, and there are many vehicles on different parts of the globe in the space that runs on the Bosch technology. Bosch had unveiled a driverless electric shuttle at CES 2019 that features almost every advanced technology that we can think of in the automated, connected, electrified space, and has demonstrated that as an organization, we are really well prepared to play in this ground. And coming to RBEI, we are more focused on the software, and the transition to electric vehicles will bring a lot more of opportunities for us. And it's clear for us that we will have to do some reskilling of our engineering force as we go along. So that will definitely happen.
So that sounds interesting. When you said, like reskilling of, the engineers, which is very much required, I'll touch upon that the later part of the question. But wanted to understand the context, right? Yes, like, of course, be it in Europe, the adoption would be slightly, better because when you consider this, right, predominantly 70 to 80% of energy what we consume comes still from the fossil fuel. So how does it going to make a difference when the vehicles are all getting electrified? But I just wanted to check with you, what is your view on electrification in India?
Okay, I think their views have slightly changed pre-COVID and post-COVID. But I would like to tell that India was really gearing up with the policy groundwork to hasten the transition to the EVs before the pandemic shook the nation as well as the automotive industry. The industry, which had been really struggling with the transition from transition to BS6 to meet the emission norms deadline, was also hit by the lockdowns to out of the COVID, and EV adoption was no exception to that. So we also had a lot of disruptions in the supply chain that slowed down the EV adoption because of the lack of component availability in the market. But as a nation, we still have to expedite the transition to EVs to reduce the fuel import bill, as well as to address the issues related to the urban population and impact of climate crisis, like the rest of the world do. It is a huge opportunity in India. The electric vehicle market is likely to be a 50,000 crore opportunity by 2025, and the lead being taken by the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler. We might also see a rapid shift from the lead acid batteries to the lithium ion batteries because that is a barrier at this point of time. And we have more charging points, tax breaks, financial incentives coming. The government has opened the roads for electric vehicles. Recently, the Delhi government announcement of an EV policy, which gave the purchase incentives up to around 30,000 rupees for the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and around 1.5 for 5 lakhs for electric cars. It's actually a booster in the industry. But however, what we need to understand is that as an emerging economy that is dealing with a massive health and economic cost of the pandemic, there is very little fiscal room for India to announce very attractive and generous EV incentives like countries like Europe or China. And coming to the technology, the country would also need a whole lot of hyperlocal solutions in the EV space because of the unique market conditions that we have, the unique road conditions that we have, and the environment conditions that we have, which means that there is a need to have the ability to apply frugal innovation or engineering capabilities to technologies being developed for this market.
Okay, so yeah, so I think a lot of opportunities are there. But what would you really see that are going to be the key challenges the industry is posing for India especially?
Okay, currently the EV industry in India is crawling, I would say, as it amounts to only less than 1% of the total vehicle sales that we have. Government of India has got a very ambitious target to achieve the 30% EV penetration in the transport sector by 2030. But the restrictive conditions in the FAME policy itself is a blocker. For example, it says that 50% of the components of the EVs have to be secured locally to qualify for subsidies. And this slows down the adoption of EVs drastically. That is one part. Coming to the customer, the landing cost of the electric cars is much higher than the cars running on the conventional fuels at this point of time. And there are less number of choices available. And as a customer, we always look for choices. Then comes the technology topics, the battery. The battery topics, the range is very high among customers. And adding to it, there are issues like non-standardization of batteries, the battery life, the dependency on imports for battery as well as component. These things, actually impact a lot. Some of these things, there are certain breakthroughs which are happening because I was reading in the paper a couple of days back that one of the organizations is offering a battery warranty up to 8 years or up to 1.6 lakh kilometers, which is really, really good. But when it comes to a country like India, we have serious inadequacy in the quality as well as the access to the charging infrastructure. And we also have inadequate supply of electricity in several parts of India. Forget the renewable part. Yeah. So, and we also coming to the payments that we need to do for smart charging. We also have a lack of safe and secure payment mechanism, unlike the developed countries which have already shifted to technologies like blockchain. So there are a lot of challenges that we need to overcome, and a lot of it can be overcome using technology, is my strong belief.
Okay, I think I think you rightly said. I think this is the ecosystem which has to come into play, which will make this challenges, addressed actually. And I think we have a little longer way. There are here and there, we could see a lot of entrepreneurs picking up those areas and working on, be it working on the grid, smart grids, or be it working on the payments, and be it working on the charging infrastructures, fast chargers, deploying fast chargers at multiple places. There are a lot of opportunities. Yes, I think with entrepreneurship, I think we would be able to address few of the challenges the what the industry is forcing. And just wanted to check, the battery charging is actually the key, ingredient, right? Like, key important element when it comes to battery technology. So, how do you, what are all actually, like, if you could throw some light on the new technologies and solutions that could make charging a little more easier and faster?
Okay, I would say that EV charging is very easy. What is the reason? There are only two types of fuels, which is either AC or the DC. But it's not as simple as that. AC charging is the simplest kind of charging to find. Outlets are everywhere, and almost every EV charger that you encounter at home, shopping malls, etc., are AC chargers. But this is a very slow way of charging. DC charging is much more faster, and we have currently developed chargers which are ranging from 50 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, and they actually give the drivers an option to get a faster boost of energy. So we will see more of these faster chargers in the future. But there are certain studies which are still going on to check the impact of the fast charging on the battery life due to the fact that battery gets subjected to higher temperatures and resistance. So this is on the way. For example, in the superchargers, there are a lot of breakthroughs. If you follow the Tesla world, the third generation of the supercharger called V3 supercharger for Tesla, the charger can charge a car in less than 15 minutes. This is something which is a breakthrough. The other topic of interest in the charging world is the wireless charging, because where do you really charge your vehicle, and this is a very important catalyst for the mass adoption of electric vehicles to promote this. Wireless charging of cars, it works exactly similar like the wireless phone chargers, which uses kind of an inductive charging technology. So which means that in simple terms, electricity is transferred through an air gap from one magnetic coil in the charger, which is normally hidden under the surface of the road, to a second magnetic coil, which is fitted under the underside of the car. So
Okay.
with a high-powered wireless EV charging system, vehicles can automatically charge, when they park in places. So which means it's an ideal solution to keep taxis or autonomous vehicles perpetually charged. So you don't need a specific charging station, delivers more convenience, less clutter in the public spaces. So this is something which is being explored. And BMW has recently launched a pilot with around 200 vehicles, which is the BMW 53e plug-in hybrid series, with a charge point which is fixed to the vehicle's undercarriage. So we have to see how this technology progresses. Another interesting concept is, mobile chargers. The chargers which comes in van. This is something which we could not imagine some years back. For example, one of the premier OEMs like Volkswagen, they have unveiled a charger which can be fitted onto a van, which can hold up to 36 kilowatt hours of power, which is nearly 5 times the capacity of a base level Tesla Model S. So this is really incredible. But what we need to keep in mind is that battery charging is not plugging to the charging station. There are a lot more elements to it, which is charging communication, charging control, then reactive and scheduled load balancing when it is connected to the grid, billing, authorization. A whole lot of other topics are also there with charging. Interestingly, Bosch has already a lot of solutions in this space. Maybe one of the examples is something like the Universal Charge Control Module, which is compatible with all worldwide charging standards. Currently, that is a disadvantage. Worldwide we have standards like a CCS for EU, maybe a CADMO for Japan, and so on. So this particular universal charge control module is in a single box, and it is integrated with the vehicle control unit. So that's an interesting technology. The
Okay.
other top, yeah. So that is something which we can look through.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting actually. Would that brings to me an question, like how much? I think I'm pretty sure that Bosch would be working on many of these programs with these OEMs. So what are some of the technologies Bosch has worked on globally that can be adopted in India?
Okay, I touched upon some of them earlier, but and as I mentioned that there are already a huge number of electric and hybrid cars equipped with Bosch technology at this point of time. Um, I would say that Bosch is really committed to electrification in India by developing the market-leading solutions in e-powertrain, which means motors, inverters, DC-DC converters, chargers, and so on. And also, we are working a lot on the battery management systems, telematics, as well as the VCU solutions. We are creating a portfolio of products and services suited to the Indian market requirements. As I told earlier, the frugal innovation is also a component that we need to really look at it. And on the software side, we are working on multiple software solutions, which is related to smart charging, blockchain technologies for the smart payment, and solutions in the vehicle to grid, vehicle to infrastructure space. And also coming to the AI, ML, and the IoT solutions, they are being developed for prognostics, range extension, and a host of other applications. And these technologies are very important for the Indian market as well.
Okay, that's interesting. So that brings to me another important area, right? Like, so though yes, we have now found that the kind of challenges what the Indian ecosystem is facing, and what could be done, and the technologies which is in play in both in electrification, both in powertrains and the chargings and battery technologies. But this brings to me to add to another dimension to the discussion. So we are also studying closely, different markets, like what others are doing, right? We found that though there are a lot of players investing heavily, like being the Teslas of the world, or be it in Europe, there's a lot of investments going on. One interesting thing, I'm pretty much sure that you also might be echoing similar thoughts. The Chinese are actually moving ahead in this EV space. The kind of investments and which is steadily flowing from the government to build technologies on this area, being developing a city which runs completely on electric and things like that. What lessons can we learn from China to leapfrog in electrification? Though we are also working currently studying those many facets, but I would want to hear from you as well.
Okay, I also follow the China market very closely because in the race of automotive electrification, China has set the bar very high, and there is a lot to learn from them. So I would say that recognizing that the EVs would offer a clear route to becoming a major player in the global automotive market, the Chinese OEMs, they intelligently and very quickly moved to secure a stronghold in the EV market. That is a fact. And there are two, three factors which has really helped them. One is the incentivization and the heavy government intervention that has played a very crucial role in helping Chinese EV market to flourish. So basically, it started from investments into startup business to consumer subsidies, right through building a robust charging network and the charging infrastructure network across the country. This heavy interventionist approach has helped to supercharge the consumer and business confidence, and this has helped the uptake of the EVs at a fast pace. I would summarize in three words, telling that it is a result-oriented intervention. That is what really happened in China. The
Mm-hmm.
other part is that a relentless approach was applied not only to encourage the uptake of EVs, but also to deter customers from using the petrol and diesel car. Like, in Shanghai, that a license plate for a conventional fuel vehicle costs more than $10,000, whereas for EV, it comes free. The second topic is also that China is able to grow very quickly because of the emphasis on cheap production, whereas Europe and other countries emphasized on luxury car EVs. China made affordability a factor. Another very important factor is that the China was able to understand that data is a game changer. The Chinese OEMs have quickly understood how data is going to change the market because new vehicles essentially they see it as a mobile platform. And in line with the China's smartphone generation ethos, these OEMs are very much geared towards data and technology expertise, and that is where the OEMs will find values in automotive in the coming years.
Okay, that's interesting. So, for your information, actually, like, we are also working very closely with, the governments, both like the state and central as well. And many of the governments actually are taking a lot of, state governments are taking a lot of lead. In fact, we are working closely with your team as well to see like what kind of infrastructure which is required, what kind of investments which is required. We have done a deep study, and I think if all goes well, I think by end of this year or early next year, we should have some ER&D based policies from Karnataka government, and we could expect something going with few other governments as well. And we are also closely working with the Prime Minister's office as well. So let's see, like let's hope we could do something which where we can do a catch up work. So, moving on to the next segment, right? Like we spoke about, the governments and what they could do, but wanted to understand from the development angle, right? What kind of business opportunities once we have more and more electric vehicles on the road. what this e-mobility will bring and what changes will it bring, and in terms of the software development, what is going to happen. Already the lines are blurring between the technology and IT and other elements. So what kind of changes we can anticipate?
Yeah, you told it right. The classic vehicles have kind of transformed into a software defined IoT device. That's how I call it. So the personalization, connectivity, and mobility as a service are becoming more and more important for the end customers. And the underlying software in a modern vehicle, if you look at it, it contains more than 150 million lines of code at this point of time. And in 2013, if you look at it, when you talk about the overall cost of the vehicle, 10% was the software cost. And this will definitely increase to 30% or more in 2030. So this is the numbers we are talking about. And in the personalized, automated, connected, electrified market, the value for software and electronics is projected to grow from maybe around 230 to 40 billion to double in 2030, 2040. So that's the kind of transformation which we are seeing. And the future of the driving rests also on designing the core architecture of the car, as well as rethinking the software that powers it. So because safety and security creates additional requirement, and connection to the cloud makes it possible to bring in new software. So this growing complexity of software and automotive system, it will indicate that software engineering is an increasingly important discipline within the automotive system, unlike in the past. And there are a whole lot of technologies that are influencing is like, the seamless connectivity, which is required, the personalization, which is required, and in the connected car, the information collection and the data analytics, which is related to that. And again, AI coming in a big way as a component to predict software anomaly and to react to safe driving. So there are a whole lot of things which are happening, and India should harness this opportunity because we are a software hub, and we should use the power of software technology to fill this e-mobility ambition. And I think this is a great opportunity for us in the future.
I think you nailed it right. Actually, it's a huge opportunity for us. Before entering into, I told you on the skilling side, but just to touch, right? You said, personalization.
EV transition by decreasing the TCO of ICE vehicle. What happens to that? We are yet to see that. Another thing is that many consumers and customers, they are emphasizing on health, safety, and reliability, and policymakers are increasingly shaping the mobility features. If you look at majority of the European cities, they have already changed many conditions of the road. Many cities have changed policies. For example, if you look at Milan and Paris, they have transformed many kilometers of their road streets, which are previously used by car, to only EVs and and pedestrians. So there are a lot of things which are happening there. And the rebound from COVID-19 crisis, I think it will differ country by country. It is expected that Europe will make a quick recovery. And if you look at majority of the European OEMs that we work with, they have publicly committed to having reached the target, and they have rolled out unprecedented number of battery-powered EVs and plug-in hybrid in this situation. China has committed more, but we have to see in the Indian scenario what really happens, because the buying power has reduced, and we may not have so much of fiscal incentives from the government because the government is already spending money on a lot of other topics. Then China was for India, China was the largest component supplier to the ecosystem, and this geopolitical tension that is happening between India and China has added to the supply chain risk. So the rate of adoption will really depend on our ability to develop an indigenous supply chain in a time-bound manner, and I really wish and I hope it happens very soon.
Yeah, I think a lot of things has to come on play on the simultaneously to make this happen for us actually. So the Indian ER&D ecosystem, right? Like we have about 600,000 engineers currently being working directly on the core engineering aspects actually. And but when this all personalization, electrification, all those things happen, the demand for talent is going to grow significantly. Though yes, we as NASCOM also is working on, and along with you as well, you have strategic investments in many of the what do you call, leading research organizations and things like that. Those are all known, but our question is actually like, where is the next set of engineers going to come from? So what we were looking at this particular thing, like I just thought I will just touch on this as well. Uh, the girls comprise about 50 percentage of STEM and science especially, and 30 percentage of engineering graduates, among actually the highest in the world, right? And but when it comes to the workplace, the numbers drop dramatically. So when you take up the senior leadership, we have 11 percentage of women representation, and when you take the mid level, it's about 20 percentage, and when you take this to the junior level, this is 38 percentage. What could make it better? We have a we are ready to take the kind of work which is going to come to us.
Okay, it's a good topic and an interesting topic which we are also working continuously. I would say that by choice or by necessity, most women typically pick up the additional responsibility for meeting their family needs by the time they reach their mid levels of the career. Yeah, be it childcare or caring for aging parents in an Indian scenario and so on. Then they also have the fear of asking for adjusted working hours or asking for more remote working days. This is also a factor for highly qualified women to get off track, and companies lose out on growing talent. It happens everywhere. The COVID has solved the remote working challenges, but they
Yes.
have added some more challenges to this space, which I don't want to discuss now. But I would say, what can we do to help them? One is finding a right mentor. A right mentor can provide women with a sounding board of challenges, and they can also give them a supportive network for growth. Organizations are putting formal mentoring programs in place where the mentees can choose from a pool of mentors, and this kind of a systematic guidance and feedback will help. The next one I would say is very important is also to have women role models in the organization. It actually gives the confidence to the younger generations to look up to the seniors who have made it to the top with much less flexible policies and ecosystems they had when they were in their mid career. So that's definitely motivating that now we have a better ecosystem, so we have better chances to go up. Another important topic is the HR policies itself. More flexible work time policies will definitely help. And maternity leave support is required, and very important is also a support required for re-entry after any break. And that is something which is missing in most of the organizations at this point of time. One more aspect is also the career trajectories of the employees, and advancement is in career is no longer limited to this proverbial, what we call as a career ladder. We need to offer employees the chance to move laterally, vertically, and sometimes even diagonally, making it more like a career lattice, which helps them to explore new skills, projects, and positions. So this is really important. But finally, what I would say, the major enabler is self, the mindset, the attitude, and the confidence that I can make it, and not to forget a lot of hard work too comes with that.
So yeah, it's I think a lot to take from here actually. Like last NASCOM is also working on a lot of in diversity and inclusion. It is really good having a chat with you, Lata. Actually, like we covered what are all actually the challenges. What we could do as an industry to come together and solve certain things, and we would look forward to have your support as well as we work on many of your the skilling activities and things like that. And I'm really sure that you are also passionate about coaching and mentoring, so we would like to take your support as well as we move forward. Thank you for your time and it is pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Madhu. It's a pleasure for me to be associated with it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.